The first game I'm going to talk about is Daytona Racing USA. Do you guys remember this game from the arcades? Well, there was always a ton of them lined up against the wall, and you could compete against your friends. I remember being so pumped up at the New York casino in Vegas, you could buy a wristband and play the games for free for the entire day. So I would do my best to crash into all the other players, of course, and ruin their races. This game was developed by Sega in 1993, and it was released in 1994. Basically, it was inspired by the current popularity of NASCAR, and they wanted to make a realistic-looking game that was utilizing their new technology. Now, the interesting thing about this game is that it ran at an impressive 60 frames per second, which is impressive for the time. PlayStation and Nintendo 64 ran anywhere between 20 and 30, so because of that, it had a much smoother feel to it and fans loved it. It quickly became the best-selling arcade game of 1994 and one of the best-selling games of 1995. In 2002, Sega released a report citing it as one of the all-time best-selling arcade games, and I'm sure you can still see it around if you look. I bet most of us have great memories playing this game. Does anyone remember Project Gotham or Project Gotham 2? If you had an original Xbox, you probably had these games, or at the very least played them. Project Gotham 1 was released exclusively for the Xbox as a launch title in November of 2001. It had real radio stations and featured a scoring system based on how you drive, and you would be awarded kudos. The combined sales of Project Gotham racing games had reached 2.1 million units in the United States by July of 2006. But what I remember was being blown away by the graphics in this game. Now, I went straight from Nintendo 64 to Xbox, so boy was I impressed. But what I mostly remember was the excellent car selection in this game. You had a ton of ultra-rare historical vehicles that as a kid I loved. You had the AC 427 Cobra, the Ferrari 250 GTO, the Lancia Stratos, Pontiac GTO, Dodge Vipers, the Jaguar XJ220, Porsche 911s, the Ferrari F40 and F50, the Porsche 959, Ford GT40, and the Enzo Ferrari, just to name a few. This game really did feel like a jump up in the racing genre, and I had a blast with the drifting game modes and all the variety that it had. Unfortunately, Activision purchased Bizarre Studios, the creator of the game, and eventually shut them down in 2011. However, Microsoft retained the rights, so maybe one day in the future we'll see more Project Gotham games. Where to begin with Burnout Revenge? Nothing was more fun than this game. Getting some Mountain Dews and some Pizza Hut and playing with some friends was a great way to spend a Friday night. This game was released in North America on September 13th, 2005. The point of this game was to race while taking out your opponents as well as all the traffic around you. But my favorite part of the game had to be the game mode where your entire goal was to launch your car into a preset scenario and do as much monetary damage as possible. You would get combos and eventually get a crash breaker where you would basically just make your car explode. The other Burnout titles were great, but this is the one that really stands out the most to me. After this game, Criterion Games made Burnout Paradise, which I felt was an unfinished disaster. Its developer, Criterion Games, is a subsidiary of EA Games. They've developed a lot of major game titles that you're probably familiar with, such as Need for Speed, Battlefront 2, Battlefield 5, and the upcoming Battlefield 2042. As of May 8th, 2018, you can still buy this game for Xbox One, so if you're interested in this genre of games, why not try it out? It's a pretty good game. Need for Speed Carbon was the most fun of the Need for Speed games in my opinion, and it's the only one that will appear on this list. It originally came out on October 30th, 2006, but was eventually available for purchase on GameCube, Wii, Xbox, PC, Xbox 360, PlayStation 2 and 3, Mac OS, Game Boy Advance, DS, a mobile port, and PSP. This game featured an amazing customization option for all the cars, and an impressive variety of vehicles to choose from classic muscle cars to modern supercars. It also had live action sequences that now border on cringy, but were pretty entertaining at the time. In fact, many people will notice Battlestar Galactica star Tamo Pennicott as the main antagonist. As of September 1st, 2021, the online for this game is no longer going to be supported, and the game is being pulled from all online stores, but it had a great run. I had this game for the Wii, and it was interesting that you could use the Wii controller as a gas pedal and the nunchuck as your steering mechanism. Now, one thing I liked was the ability to slow down time to make tight maneuvers through police. It also had a nice achievement system to unlock further customization options and vehicles. The police chases in this game were intense and could last a very long time. There were ways to use the map to disable the cop cars behind you to give yourself a chance to escape, which was very interesting. After this installment in the Need for Speed series, none of the games really captured the excitement that this game made me feel. The Gran Turismo series is one of the big dogs in the racing genre, but other than Forza, probably the one that I've played the least. It was of course developed by Sony Interactive Entertainment, and it was released on November 24, 2010 exclusively for the PlayStation 3. But out of all the Gran Turismo games, this one has always stood out the most to me. Now, it sold over 10 million copies and it was extremely highly rated. Gran Turismo 5 had an impressive total of 1,089 cars, including Ferrari, Lamborghini, and Bugatti for the first time ever in the series. But what stood out to me was the addition of a damage model for cars that had sustained hits during a race. Gran Turismo 5 allows players to drive in 31 different locations and 81 different tracks. It included a basic online mode, but that was shut down after only 4 years after the game came out. I never actually owned this game, but I did play it pretty extensively at my friends' houses, and I remember having a great time playing it. Specifically, I remember having a lot of fun in a race with all subcompact cars through tight, narrow tracks. This game would probably be the most realistic driving simulator to appear on my list, since I prefer to play games that value fun over realism. Calling BeamNG Drive a racing game would be a lie, because it's more of a driving simulator, but it still fits perfectly on this list. First off, it's developed by a German studio that works exclusively on this game, and it was first available on Steam Early Access in May of 2015. Now, when this game was first released, I purchased it, but I didn't play it much because I found the driving physics terrible and frustrating. But as the game had progressed, it is a lot more realistic and a lot more fun now. I have other videos on my channel where I play this game pretty extensively to test out the soft body damage modeling. So the crashes are incredibly realistic and satisfying, and the cars react in a realistic manner. This game is for sale on Steam and other online stores, and I recommend it because it is always good for a laugh, and it has a very active modding community. Due to the nature of this game, it does not have an online multiplayer feature, although there are mods that can add some basic online play. The maps and the cars are varied, and there is a lot to experiment with and a lot to do in this game. Cruisin USA was a very interesting game when it was released. First off, it was designed as a way to compete with Daytona USA, as well as Namco's Ridge Racer as the top-selling arcade game, and in fact, it was able to do just that. It was developed by Midway Games, which was a major studio during this time period. They made many of the classics, such as Rush, NBA Jam, NFL Blitz, Mortal Kombat, and Miss Pac-Man. The arcade version was released in November of 1994, and that's the version that we'll talk about today, not the disastrous Nintendo 64 port. There were 4 primary cars and 3 bonus cars that you could play as. These were all designed after 4 real vehicles, but the actual names were never licensed. The real charm of this game is how insane and ridiculous it felt. It was utter nonsense and the tracks made no sense. There was random jumps, cars driving in the wrong direction, and in the arcade version you could even run over animals and they would explode. The soundtrack was hilarious, and the graphics looked dated, even in 1994. But for some reason, this game stuck with me. Here we are, still talking about it. Maybe it's because I used to play this game with my dad a lot in Dave & Buster's, and those are just good memories. It may not be the most polished or realistic or even competent game, but it definitely was fun. Rush 2 Extreme Racing USA was a great jump forward in the racing genre in my opinion. It was also developed by Midway Games. It was released on November 10th, 1998. Now I remember I bought this game used from Blockbuster Video, and it ended up being one of my all-time favorite games. The great thing about this game was its replayability and its variety. Each map had a reverse layout, as well as different secret routes. Every map also had special collectibles that would unlock different cars. Having a damage model for every car certainly felt ahead of its time, as did its relatively realistic physics. Collecting the keys and Mountain Dew cans around the map added a fun objective if you didn't feel just like racing. Another major positive was that the game had special tracks just for tricks and stunts, and it would give you a score. There were also a ton of cheat codes that allowed you to change almost every aspect of the game. One of my favorite things to do was to enable permanent death, which meant if you destroyed your car, that's it. The race was over and you lose. But that means that the AI cars could also be permanently taken out. I cannot say enough how great this game was. I wish the Rush series didn't end and they continued to make fun games like this. Even the split-screen multiplayer was done well, and it was a lot of fun with friends, something that many games of this era fail to do. Road Rash 64 might raise a few eyebrows for being on the list, but in the end, this is a racing game. The ultimate goal is to finish in first place. It was released on September 27, 1999 for Nintendo 64. It was developed by a company called Pacific Coast Power and Light. And if my information is correct, that company was started by the founder of EA Sports as well as an Atari Games employee, so they definitely knew what they were doing. This game is going to be an outlier in the list for several reasons. 1, it's motorcycles, not cars, and 2, it contains hand-to-hand combat. But since it is one of my all-time favorite games, it was definitely going to be near the top of my list. The point of this game is to race across the map on your motorcycle, avoiding being crashed by the police or rival racers. There are map hazards as well as traffic to keep things interesting. There are 4 different bikes per stage. The further you advance, the better the bikes become. There are a variety of weapons with different power, reach, and speed. But my personal favorite is the stunning weapons, which temporarily disable an opponent's ability to steer or attack. A company on Steam tried to recreate this game, but no one has been able to recreate the amount of fun this game was, especially if you had some friends with you. The soundtrack was great, the gameplay was exciting, and it had tons of replayability. Few games have ever made me laugh as hard as Road Rash 64. It should come as no surprise from anyone who has seen my YouTube channel that my pick for the greatest racing game of all time is Wreckfest. The first version of this game was released in December of 2013, but it was basically just a physics demo of what the game could do, and it was entitled Next Car Game. The game itself was officially released June 14, 2018, and since then development has stayed active with an active modding community and regular DLC content. The real reason this game is so fun is the sheer excitement of the accidents and the consequences to your car. The soft body model damage is so realistic. It is a blast to see what you can do to other people's cars and what happens to yours. Many of the tracks are designed to create the most intense car accidents possible, and the demolition derby modes, of course, are non-stop car smashing. There is a large variety of vehicles based on real cars, but unfortunately no real cars were ever able to be licensed. Matches consist of up to 24 cars competing to get first place, or basically just to survive. There are multiple damage modes, which increase or decrease the amount of damage your car gets, and once your health is gone, you are out of the race unless respawning is turned on. There are online tournaments to unlock new vehicles, as well as customization options for your cars. Now, I've never laughed so hard in this game as I have at any other game, and I even run out of breath, which is pretty rare for me. If you have a console or a PC compatible with Wreckfest, please try it out. It is very reasonably priced, and in my opinion, it is the best racing game of all time.